Chapter 1. Around midnight, Wednesday night. The stars were out in force this unusually clear night in April. The Milky Way, a distant, opaque streak, splashed across the sky. Billions of pinpoint lights that had traveled across time so he could see them tonight. He loved it out here. Even during the lowest times in his life, he'd made it here a few times a year to just sit and think, try to clear his head, he figured. A sort of reset button. His life didn't seem as crappy when he considered how small he was compared to the universe, how he was just one imperfect human. But his failings didn't keep the big wheel from turning. It gave him hope. After thrumming his fingers against the steering wheel for a minute, he got out of the car and stretched his back, then reached into the pocket of his thin coat. He should have worn something warmer. No cloud cover meant the temperature had dipped almost to freezing, and the wind was blowing as it always did. His fingertips brushed against the pack of cigarettes he'd purchased a half-hour ago at the mini-mart. He'd kicked the habit years ago, but when he was stressed, like tonight, he often found himself buying a pack, a sort of test to see if he could get through whatever shit was happening without cracking it open. Tonight was one of those nights. The beach at the boat ramp was pitch dark and technically only open to the public for 50 feet on either side. With a few cranky exceptions, most residents didn't mind if folks strolled along the rocky shore collecting shells and rocks or even having a picnic. Besides, most of the homes were at least 200 feet up on the bluff overlooking the beach. They couldn't see things like the distant glow of the campfire that caught his attention. The 1980s Ford Bronco and dinged-up Chevy pickup parked nose-to-nose across from him probably belonged to whoever was having a late-night beach party. The bonfire was a good 100 yards away from where he stood, tucked against the bluff with massive beach logs protecting it and the revelers from the wind. Things hadn't changed since he'd been in high school. Kids still came out here over breaks, on weekends, and during the summer, especially seniors celebrating their last gasps as teenagers before the grind of adulthood stole their dreams. Nothing like a six-pack of cheap beer and swapping lies with friends. He'd been a kid like that, with dreams of his own, long ago in another life. He was starting to dream again. He'd been beginning to hope maybe he'd outrun his demons, until he'd seen him the other day. Why now, when it seemed like his life was finally improving? There was a little time before the man he was meeting would arrive, and the tug of the waves proved too strong for him to resist. Stepping off the concrete of the ramp, he picked his way to the water's edge. The tide was going out, the gentle waves leaving their unique pattern in the seaweed and gritty patches of sand as they retreated. It was a comforting cycle, and one he'd been close to his entire life. The waning moon had dwindled to an almost imperceptible crescent, but the stars were enough for him to see by. Enough at least so he didn't trip over the larger rocks and driftwood along the way. The wind changed direction, bringing the sound of laughter to his ears. He hoped the kids there had all their dreams come true. He hoped they never found themselves where he was right now, in his mid-30s with a criminal record and hardly any money in the bank, working menial jobs. There was a time when he'd thought he'd be married and maybe have a kid by now. He'd always liked kids and thought he might have been a good father. Maybe he still had a chance. But some strange instinct told him the gate was closing fast. Stamping down the desire to open the cigarettes, he pulled his cell phone out of his other pocket. He doubted his brother would pick up, even though he was awake. His brother didn't sleep much at the best of times. At the worst, he'd stay awake for days, powered by Mountain Dew and energy bars. Predictably, the call went to voicemail. He pressed end and tried again, a sense of urgency welling in his chest as he waited alone in the chilly darkness. Voicemail picked up again. This time he left a message, although it was probably far too late. "It's me, but you know that."